Well, concerns have been raised about the possible looting of funds allocated for the flood disaster in KwaZulu-Natal. Let's talk about this with Karam Singh from Corruption Watch. Karam, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program. So, are South Africans right to be so suspicious of government and its handling of emergency money, especially when it's for such a tragic situation?
Yes, I mean, it's obviously such devastation, and it's hard to watch and to hear the testimony. So I want to say, first of all, that our thoughts and our prayers go to all the people that are affected by these devastating floods. But I think the public is right to be skeptical, because we're not too far away from what we saw with the PPE debacle, where significant amounts of funds were mobilized to address that issue. And we saw corruption in that process, misallocation and looting. So, it's good to hear the Premier of KZN, and it's good to hear the parliamentarians talking about the need, for strong oversight. And I think the watchwords of the Premier were around accountability, around openness, and around transparency in the process. And I think that's where we need to begin the discussion around what we can do to ensure that these funds aren't looted.
And how much does a vow from the Premier hold, given that he's not exactly going to be dispersing the funds himself? He won't be overlooking every single transaction. So in order for there to be complete transparency and lawful use of this money, everyone has to be on board.
Absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of where the funds are coming from, if the funds are coming from National Treasury, if the funds are coming from provincial treasury, or where they're coming from, you need to have systems in place, first of all, within government to say, this is exactly the amount that's been budgeted for, these are the funds that have been allocated, and these are how they're being distributed. So in terms of that, in terms of the line function departments, they need to have their monitoring systems in place. But then you also need to ensure that the appropriate oversight bodies are also mobilized. So we've heard about the Auditor General doing real-time audits. We're now hearing from National SCOPA, and obviously Provincial SCOPA in KZN also have an important oversight role. The only way we can exercise proper monitoring and oversight is if there's transparency in the system, which means that the information has to be published. There needs to be publication of the exact amounts that are being allocated so that we can then begin to follow the trail of the money. Otherwise, if we look at this after the fact, we're going to have another PPE situation where the money's gone and it won't go to the intended place, and it'll be difficult to recover those monies.
Ultimately, then, the questions or the skepticism among South Africans that the funds will be spent on what their intended use speaks to a breakdown in the trust between the government and citizens. How does that then become repaired in the long term?
It's going to take a lot of time. I mean, I think that breakdown in trust is something which has happened over several decades now. Whenever we see a significant amount of money allocated, mobilized for a particular intervention, we know that there's serious fraud risks in place. So, the type of principles that we're talking about, principles around accountability, principles around transparency, and trying to foolproof the system by ensuring that there's appropriate publication of data can assist us. But in terms of the process of rebuilding that trust, it's going to take time, and government, has to now create a track record where they can show that they're responsible around the way money is spent, and that when money is misspent, that there's appropriate accountability, and we see consequence management for fraudulent and criminal activity when it comes to corruption for relief funds.
What is your view on the suggestion made by some people that perhaps NGOs, relief organizations, should take the lead on the disbursement of this money? Yes, it's not practical in all circumstances, but how much involvement, how much power and influence should the NGO sector be given in the coming weeks and months in KZN?
I think when it comes to tackling any of our big national challenges, we need a partnership. The President's spoken about this kind of notion of social compacting all the time. So the notion of the role of government, the role of the private sector, and the role of civil society is absolutely critical. So, we don't hear about the gift to the givers. We don't hear about corruption and fraud when it comes to their interventions. And I've seen people say cynically, don't give the money to government, give the money to the gift to the givers, because they have a track record, you know. So I think where government can partner appropriately with the private sector, where they can partner appropriately with civil society, they need to do that. And if they need to set up another kind of special purpose vehicle like the Solidarity Fund to ensure that we don't see the type of fraud and corruption we saw with the PPE, then so be it. Then that could be a positive step forward in this intervention.
But ultimately, the state is the state, and outsourcing that level of power and control, which should be part of what government does daily, does not fix the fundamental problem.
You know, it's the real challenge that we have in this current moment. You know, we were meant to have we've got a judiciable Bill of Rights, which is meant to provide socioeconomic rights to everybody. And, we just see that over time we've moved away from government being a capable partner to ensure that it's able to give the support needed to be a developmental state. At the moment now, it seems as if we've really retreated from the role that government can play in terms of these basic service delivery issues. So I think, unfortunately, that's the moment that we find ourselves at. And as you've said, until government can rebuild that trust, then we're going to have that kind of skepticism about government's ability to deliver when they need to.
Karam Singh from Corruption Watch, good to speak to you. Karam is Executive Director at Corruption Watch.